Good morning. Welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center, where we're joined today by astronauts Peggy Whitson and Jack Fisher, who are just recently returned a little over a week ago from a long stay at the International Space Station. They landed on September 2nd and are here to tell us a little bit about their time there. Peggy spent about 9.5 months in space and set several records along the way, including the most cumulative time for a U.S. astronaut in space, 665 days. Over 3 missions, and the most consecutive time in space for a female astronaut, 288 days on this mission. And Jack joined the space station in April for his first trip to space and spent 136 days there. Having the two of them in space together, along with several other crew members who rotated in and out along the way, it let us get a lot of extra science done while they were there. And now we're going to let them tell us each a little bit about their mission, and then we'll take questions.
Well, we had a fantastic time working together on board the space station. We had lots of visiting vehicles over the time frame. We had SpaceX's, I think there were 3 when I was there, and Cygnus, which was a great cargo vehicle. I was really surprised by the size of that. We were able to get a lot of trash in there we needed. I'm thinking the next guys are going to be wishing they had their Cygnus a little sooner, because I'm thinking they're going to have a lot of trash by the time that arrives. But we had opportunity to do some spacewalks, which were always a blast, and it was fun in addition to being one of those very challenging things to do, physically, mentally challenging things, but it was a blast. But I think this time the thing that impressed me the most was the quality and caliber of science that we're doing now. I'm really was excited by it. So I had a great time.
Yeah, it was great, and since Peggy already said everything we did, I'm done. No, it was great to see, and I don't have a lot of experience in space, obviously, but working as a Capcom for a long time, I was able to see the evolution of how we do operations on the space station, and the team now is just so much more efficient. I think we ended up averaging like 60 hours of science a week with just the 2 of us, which back in the day, 30 hours of science for a whole crew was really amazing, but you're able to do that because they're leveraging so much of the operations that you can do from the ground. We're doing things with a robotic arm now that are just amazing and almost incomprehensible, 5 years ago. So we're able to catch a vehicle, for instance, and as soon as you've caught it, you put the brakes on, you walk away, you go back to work, you get another 5 hours of science done. You come back 5 hours later, it's time to open the hatch, because they've done everything else from the ground, moved it over with the robotic arm, put it on the hatch, run the bolts, and they've just become so much more efficient that this fine-oiled, fine-tuned machine is able to crank out a lot more science. So it was great to be a part of that. Obviously, to be on orbit with the Space Ninja and Fyodor was fantastic, because I got to learn from the best. So overall, it was just a fantastic mission, and it was great to represent this incredible team, this worldwide team that is rocking the science every day.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you back. We're going to switch things up a little bit today and start with some questions from people who are following along online. We've got a Facebook Live going on right now, and you can send in your questions in the comment section there, or on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtag AskNASA. But we're going to start with some of those questions and then come take questions in the room. So first of all, for Peggy, Gregory Edwards on Facebook asked if you feel homesick for the space station now.
Well, actually, a little bit. There are parts of it that I really miss, but I'd been there long enough, I think, that I was ready to come home, especially to the toilet. It's nice to be able to flush. So I was ready to, I think, that point. But it's funny, because I could have stayed longer. I think it wouldn't have been a problem. But once, like a couple weeks before landing, I made that switch in my head, and then it was like, okay, that was the 2 longest weeks of the mission, was because once I decided I was ready to come home, then it was a long time to get here.
Yeah. Is it the same for you, Jack, or was it a little different since you hadn't been up there as
You know,
long?
I definitely loved being up there and, floating around and playing with your food and looking out the window. Just that's a whole lot of fun, and feeling like every day you're able to be part of this team and make a difference. But it's totally true. Once you shift gears, it was the same every time, I deployed. Once you shift gears and you're thinking about coming home, then it's a different mental state. And, you have to play with your mind a bit to make sure that you keep your motivation up over a long mission. Obviously, Peggy was there a lot longer, but then once you make that final shift in the gear, you're ready.
Yeah.
And besides, my wife is super hot, so I want to get home to her.
And when we had another one for you, this one is from Stacy Hutchins on Facebook, and she asked if you have any tips or advice for her son, Jack, who also wants to be
What
an
a great
astronaut.
name. Well, it's kind of tough when you're younger because there's lots of ways to make fun of Jack. Jack in the Box, Jack. I think that it's important for everybody to just keep your eyes open as you're going through life and try new things so that you can find that passion. We talked a lot, the one piece of advice, and I boiled it down to the last thing my dad said to me, which was, I dare you to dream, because you need to find your passion, that thing that really ignites your soul, and then you need to, dare to do it. Nobody's going to hand it to you. There's a lot of that in our world today that, oh, I deserve this and I deserve that. You don't deserve anything. If you don't take what you were given and make something of it and work really hard at it, you're not going to accomplish anything. So that's kind of the advice to give. Keep your eyes open, find that passion, and then work really hard at it.
And that'll help you in a lot of different ways, I'm sure. All right, we're actually going to wrap up the Facebook Live online now, but if you want to keep tuning in, you can go to nasa.gov/live. And meanwhile, we're going to start taking questions here on the room, but if you have a question on the phone bridge, you can press *1 to get that question registered, and if it gets answered, you can press *2 to dismiss it. All right, we'll start over here with Mark Crow, and if you can let us know who your question's for, we'll try and get it answered.
Thank you, Mark Carruth, for Aviation Week and Space Technology. Mine's for Peggy Whitson. I wonder how you think your extended mission will help contribute most to the goals of research that Scott and Mikkel were doing on their 340 days. Is there data that will come from your experience that will push that sort of knowledge set of what happens after 6 months and towards a year that you think is extremely valuable?
Well, I think we hadn't originally planned for me to be up there that long, so there was no, proactive science selection based on that. However, I was participating in one of the big studies that was accomplished during that 1 year, which was the fluid shift study, looking at how fluids shift and changes in the eyes, and trying to better understand that process over a more extended period of time. And so with the mission extension, we added additional data takes so that we could gather that additional data and be another N in the subject count for that. Many of the other investigations also were able to expand their data sets because I got to do additional data collections for them as well. So I do think there were some contributions. It's still a very small N, and human studies have a huge variation in individual reactions. So it's good to have the additional data points. I'm sure it contributes in that sense. It wasn't quite as long as they were up there, but I think it probably helps the scientists understand the progression. So I think it was good.
If I can ask a follow-up, I will.
Sure.
When the discussion of the 1 year missions first came up, I think that was a little before we were kind of getting into the Deep Space Gateway and the potential there. And I'm sort of drawing on your experience as a researcher in biochemistry and so forth. But I'm wondering, do you think doing more of these long-term missions on the space station would be a good thing, or it would be good to do them when you can and fold in the Deep Deep Space Gateway long duration to get the information you're seeking about whether humans can trek to Mars?
Yeah, I think we do need additional information in heading to Mars, just about the human body. And it's going to take some subject numbers in order to make the investigations have any significance to determine, is this just just because this person has this unusual reaction, or is this a common result? And so I do think we need additional subject numbers for that. There are a lot of things that I think we will find change and plateau, but there are going to be some things that continue to change, and we need to better understand those physiologic things that continue to change in order to understand how it affects the human body and make us better prepared when we do those long duration missions to Mars.
Okay, and I think we've got Robert Perlman here.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. With a question for Peggy. Your first Soyuz landing was rougher than most, being a ballistic reentry, but you were coming back from fewer days in space, and this time was a normal landing, but with longer days. Can you compare, or you were able to determine which was more harrowing on the body, maybe even bringing in your shuttle landing from your first flight?
I'd rather land on a shuttle. Once you're under the parachutes, you're falling at the same rate. So you hit the ground at the same, as long as the soft landing engines fire, you hit the ground at the same approximate speed. We had a windier day when I had the ballistic landing after Expedition 16, and so we bounced and rolled more than we did this time. It still feels pretty much like a pretty good car crash. It was, it's definitely a jolting experience.
Good.
Well, okay.
Let's just not have car crashes.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, no, I think it's still pretty jolting experience landing on the ground after a long duration mission. I don't know that there was any particular difference. I think because we'd gone through the ballistic reentry after Expedition 16, by the time we got to that, it didn't seem as dramatic because we had been basically shaken up quite a bit beforehand. In this case, when the parachute opened, it was very dramatic then because we hadn't been shaken up in advance. And so our body was that was our first exposure to gravity and being moved around like that. And so it seemed more dramatic this time. So I think it just has to do with, your body adapts very quickly to being those feelings again, but the initial response is, it's very stimulating.
Stimulating. Provocative is the word we're supposed to use.
Provocative. So, yeah.
Jack, was it what you expected?
No. Well, how are you supposed to know what it's going to be like? I mean, for me, the under the chute was kind of fun because it was continuous motion, but boy, the good car crash was it was full up. So that was pretty exciting. Provocative.
All right, go ahead.
I can ask a follow-up for Jack. This was your first flight, and the space station has, in recent years, gained a lot of creature comforts. Projection screen, having the IP phone to be able to talk to family every weekend. But as we look out, going further out into space, those creature comforts are probably going to fall away. How important psychologically to making it through a 136-day mission or even longer are those nice connections to home, or could you see going through the same flight without having any of those or even connection back to Earth?
You'll have some form of connection back to Earth, and we've gotten very good at that. I would say, comparing this to my deployments in the military, this was way better connectivity. I was able to talk with my wife almost every day, so it's amazingly good on the space station. First time I deployed, couldn't talk to anybody for about a month, and then 1 5-minute phone call a week. Yeah, it's important to maintain that connectivity, but I think doing video messages, obviously there's going to be a delay, is sufficient. So I don't think it's something that you can't adapt to. We're spoiled on the space station. It's fantastic, but we can do with less. So I don't think it's going to be a big showstopper for long duration flights.
All right, I think we got another question here from Sophie Sanchez, but just a reminder that if you are on the phone bridge, you can press *1 to get your question answered.
Hi, Sophie Sanchez, Cosmic Chicago with Chicago Now. I had a question for Peggy. Did you have any long-term spaceflight challenges that you could use as teaching moments for our new astronauts?
I think every day is kind of a challenge. You're living and working with people and in a very close proximity. We talk about our expeditionary crew skills, which I think are really important, being able to help your crewmates, knowing when you're being a little crankier than you should be, and apologizing in advance and all that. Being able to get along is extremely important in those situations. So every day, I think, is something that you work together as a team. Some days we talked about, hey, we did the sleep shift for an undocking, and we need to work together because we don't trust ourselves to do the job, by yourself. But being able to acknowledge that and accommodate that makes you a much better team. And so I think the experience, those experiences translate very well, and it's something that we actually do teach our new astronauts is, how to use these techniques to work well with people and to work more efficiently and to work more productively together. And I think Jack and I demonstrated a lot of those capabilities that I think are very important for our future crews as well.
Y'all seem like you're having a lot of fun.
We try.
A little bit.
All right, I do think we have some questions on the phone now. So we're going to go to Historical Aerospace News Media first. Is Mark Gotch on the line? Okay,
You hear me?
Go ahead.
There we go.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, this question, first off, I'd like to congratulate you both on this record-setting mission. It was absolutely incredible. Peggy, could you tell me, what was the hardest part of this long, extended mission for you? And on the flip side of that question, can you tell me what was the absolute high point of this mission that you will never, ever forget?
The hardest part, I think, would probably be just I get bored with the food. I like to cook and make things, and you only have a certain number of meals that you can play with or change or try, figure out how to change things up. And so I get bored with the food, and so that's, I think, something very challenging. I told Jack when he first arrived, it's all about the sauce. You just have to figure out which sauce you want to try today, and you'll eat whatever with it. But it's all about the sauce, and so I think that's probably the biggest challenge for me. In terms of the single most highlight, gosh, it would be hard to pick a single most point. The EVAs are always a highlight. I think one specific example would be during the battery R&R EVAs. We were taking the batteries off of this large pallet, and the first one we had taken off, and it had been dark, and Shane and I had each of us taken an adapter plate and gone, and we installed it, and we came back, and then it was lit. Then the pallet was lit, and the pallet was this mirror shiny metal, and so you could see yourself, which is like, oh, look, I'm an astronaut. And then you can see the reflection of this beautiful Earth behind you,
awesome.
And it was just like, wow, what an amazing job I have. So.
Well, on the subject of spacewalks, we actually have a question on Twitter from Akia who asked, how do you practice for an unplanned spacewalk? I know y'all had some come up.
Same way you practice for a planned spacewalk. It's all about building the skills. So we spend a lot of time. We have just a world-class facility down the road with the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, and we get in the suit and practice using all the tools and getting used to the suit itself. I didn't find a whole lot of differences, and spacewalking is kind of intensely personal because our suit, as you can see, this poor fellow back here has got his arms going the wrong direction, so it can be hard to work in, and depending on your body anatomy, you either fit it or don't. And so the differences between the pool and space are also personal. For me, it wasn't very different, and all the training that we had in the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory of working with the tools and the suit and the tasks and having kind of situational awareness of the station and not getting lost going to where you need to go. It allows you to really do whatever you need to do outside. We don't have the ability to get perfect on spacewalks like they used to with the shuttle, where you'd have a crew completely, totally, perfectly trained for a spacewalk. We have to be able to go out there and do whatever because we're going up, months in advance, and maybe we're in Russia for training all the time. So you have to just be able to go outside and do it. And then, being able to go outside with Miss Ninja herself is nice because she has so much experience that you're able to really adapt to whatever the situation is. And it's also so much fun.
All right, let's go back to the phone bridge. I think we have a question now from Creston News Advertiser.
Hi, yeah, my question's for Peggy. After spending so much time in training and in space, how do you draw on what you learned growing up in Beaconsfield, Mount Ayr, to practice there?
Well, I think, being raised on a farm, you learn a lot about dedication, work ethic, and you get a healthy dose of stubborn to go along with it, and that gets a lot of jobs done that otherwise you might consider impossible. And I think watching my parents do things that, you just had to figure out a way to fix it, work around it, make it happen. That was part of, how I grew up. And I think that applies on Space Station too.
Makes sense. All right, and how about now from space.com?
Hi. I was curious what the most amazing thing was each of you saw out the window while in space.
Boy.
We saw an incredible aurora. I've seen auroras before, and one night I was on the IP phone talking to my husband, and I'm like, you gotta hang on, I gotta go get Jack. This is amazing. And it just kept getting better and better, and it was an amazing aurora. And
it was awesome.
That was impressive. So,
What makes a good aurora? Is it the colors or the
depth? The scale on this particular one, it was just huge. It was, usually you see an aurora and it's kind of on the edge of the horizon, and sometimes it'll dance out a little bit toward you, and this one was like overhead and all the way to the horizon. It was just amazing.
It was. I mean, I hadn't taken a single picture at night, and so I'm just fumbling around trying to capture this and sucking at it. And I think that same night we saw that the Andromeda, was it?
I think.
Oh my gosh. So I got better at taking pictures, but we never saw an aurora like that again. That was truly breathtaking.
So the view was as good as promised.
Oh, you can't imagine the view. It's way better than anything I could ever imagine. Being up there was amazing.
Okay, how about next from Kazoo Magazine?
I have a question for Peggy. Our readers at Kazoo are young girls, ages 5 to 10, and you are such an amazing role model to them, especially having applied to the astronaut program for 10 years in a row before being accepted. So you never gave up. If a young girl in particular wants to become an astronaut, or if she has any seemingly impossible dream like you once did as a child, what advice would you give to her?
Well, I think Jack was right on in terms of choosing something that you have a passion about. And I think that's probably the most important key to being successful in whatever it is that you want to be. You have to have a passion for it. But I also think for me in particular, it was trying to do things a little bit more than I thought I could. Living outside of that comfort zone, you know, pushing myself, challenging myself to do a little bit more, I think is also a very important lesson in life. You really have to push yourself to really find out how far you really can go.
All right, I think we had another question here in the room earlier.
Hi, my name is Paramita, and I'm an intern here at NASA Johnson, working with the spacesuit group on the informatics system. And so I asked this question to some of the ASCANs last week or a few weeks ago, but as experienced EVA crew members, I would like to know if you had any sort of, I guess, dream additional technologies to the EMU suit. What would they be? And that you think would help you?
I can answer for small.
Small suit would be great. Yeah, I did my first 2 spacewalks on this mission in the large, which is larger than the one I usually did spacewalks in, and you know, I have to admit, I got done with those spacewalks, and I thought, you know, hey, maybe I'm getting a little old to be doing this. Then I got to do 2 with Jack, and he was wearing the large, so I got to wear the medium. And that helped a lot. I ended up, I'm like, okay, I'm not as worthless as I thought I was. I can move around and get around a little better, but I think jumping me down to a small would be just that much more of an increase in what you think you could do, your capabilities would be. So I really think having a suit that fits is very important to your capabilities. So.
Oh, for me, the reason that a small would be better is because of reach. So everything is your arms outside. I'm kind of built like a monkey, so it works out for me. But you have to be able to have a larger anthropometric group of usability for a spacesuit to be truly effective, because not everybody has monkey arms, but they might have much better SA, so they can be better outside. So if you build it where it's not this huge reach around of all these controls and everything right here, then it would increase everybody's efficiency and allow more people to be efficient outside, and that would be the biggest improvement I think you could make on a spacesuit.
All right, I think we have some more questions online right now. And remember that you can submit yours on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtag #AskNASA. For Justin on Twitter, I want to know, what were some of your favorite experiments you did while you were on the space station?
Well, I really liked the tissue culture experiments. After I finished graduate school, I did a lot of research in tissue culture, different types of tissue culture. And I got to culture heart cells, bone cells, lung cells, and lung cancer cells. But probably the neatest investigation was looking at, one was growing these lung cancer cells using these magnetic attachment points that were attached to the cells so they could clump more like a tumor would and grow 3-dimensionally like a tumor would in your body or, you know, on the Earth. But the neat one was they took a new drug that had an antibody to the cancer cells. And so then we were growing these little mini tumors, and we added the drug, the antibody-directed drug, which would be great for chemotherapy type studies. You know, because chemotherapy, the reason it's so hazardous to you is because it's killing so many other your good cells while it's trying to kill the cancer cells. And this would be a targeted way to kill the cancer cells. And subjectively, looking under the microscope, it looked like it was working. So that was very cool.
I bet. Do you notice that like the science on board the space station has evolved over the years as you've gone on to
well, the quantity has definitely evolved. We're doing much more, many different types of experiments, and that's exciting. But I think the quality, the complexity is probably a better word. The complexity of the science we're doing is greatly improved, and I think it's going to lead to some really exciting results. Just like research here on the ground, though, it takes years to find out some of those things. I know for instance, one of the things from my first flight on Expedition 5 that's now used nowadays, it's a filtration system, and the study was looking at plants growing soybeans in this little plant culture system, but because it had to have a special air filtration system. That air filtration system is now used in surgical rooms and also used in wineries to prevent infections and molds in your wines. And you know, how would you know that growing these soybeans would have led to those things? You don't know, but I think that's kind of the neat part of doing the research.
Yeah, absolutely. And you showed us some great behind-the-scenes videos in your Speedy Time videos of experiments. Any that you particularly liked?
Well, I love I nicknamed it the cancer-seeking missiles. So as a cancer dad, that one was special to me in the battle against that terrible disease. But I think another great advantage of the science now is that it's so much more flexible. So we have, you know, an example is this NanoRack system that we put in the GEM airlock, the Japanese module airlock, and then we can put all these different satellites. And what was it, like 30-something satellites in
like 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. So it's a capability where the Japanese robotic arm grabs this launcher from the airlock, puts it outside, pukes off these satellites, and they're a great capability to have a lower cost, rapid turnaround of technology, and then we can investigate so many more things. And NanoRacks, and there's a lot of examples with our CASIS partners that we're able to get more science quicker onto the station at a lower cost, kind of build the infrastructure so that we can investigate more things. And I think that flexibility is going to lead to a lot more of these type of discoveries, as opposed to the 10 years to get it on the space station. It's a rapid cycle now, and I think it's exciting to see how much more we're going to be able to do.
Absolutely. And we have had a lot of different school experiments. So
Absolutely.
Elementary school experiments were in these small little things, and very simple, but it's really neat. I think that they actually got to have their science on the space station.
Yeah, I actually got to work on one from my high school, so how cool is that?
That is cool.
Centaurus High School in Colorado, and boom.
How did it go?
Yeah.
It worked great.
So they're very smart there.
They're much smarter than me. I can't remember what it does, but it was awesome.
I think we have another question here in the room.
Thank you. Steve Titus from Iowa Wesleyan University. I think about the intellectual horsepower that is up on the space station, and certainly you've talked about the complex science that is going on. What's the experience like for the both of you in your own experiences spiritually being up there?
Well, I think being there provides a perspective that makes you at peace. It's too bad we can't translate that too well.
Yeah. I think you look out the window and you can't help but feel that we're just one small part of a bigger whole. The people I invited to Ellington to meet us was my wife, my daughter, and my priest, because Father Howard was. I think it's important. We talked about expeditionary behavior. It takes a lot to keep the light shining and to be a good teammate and crew member, and you got to have a way to recharge the battery. And for me, that was it. And so Father Howard was very important to me, and I think that experience and just seeing just this mind-blowing beauty of the universe, it grows your faith in ways that it's hard to even describe.
All right, I think we have a couple of follow-up questions on the phone bridge here. Let's go back to historical aerospace news media.
Yes, could you tell me, you had mentioned your slightly rough landing coming back from your mission. Did you do any maneuvers or tests involving the future where astronauts will be sent and launched from Cape Canaveral in SpaceX Dragon capsules or Boeing Starliner capsules in the future. Did you do anything on that?
We did one experiment looking at a new piece of exercise hardware. It's much smaller, much more miniaturized. It's more, I think, not necessarily for the commercial providers, but for Orion or other distant exploration vehicles, trying to get our exercise device in a much smaller volume. The one we have now, our resistive exercise device, is phenomenal and it works great, but it takes up a large volume. And so this was trying to use something smaller. So we did some of the initial testing on that. You know, obviously with most things, it's got a little ways to go, but we were excited to be able to try out something that, you know, is going to be directly applied to our lessons for exploration.
We actually have a Facebook question on exercise. They want to know how often you have to exercise in order to keep your bones healthy.
Go ahead, boss.
We did about an hour of resistive exercise a day, and then we had options to do treadmill or bike ergometry as our cardiovascular conditioning system. So as in each day, it ended up being about 2 hours a day of exercise. So it was it's pretty intense, but I enjoyed it. I think it's a good, for me, it's a good, you know, psychological, you know, mellows me out and makes me happy. Jack knows I get stressed on those days when I can't exercise because of this experiment or that experiment.
For me, it was coffee. When the experiment, you couldn't have coffee, then I got a little antsy. When she couldn't have exercise, just kind of steer around her.
Well, speaking of exercise, I know you did the great video, Speedy Time Again, showing off the ARED, the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. It looks like you pretty much mastered it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. And previously, in my previous 2 missions, we were using an interim device, and it wasn't vibration isolated. So this one's much better because it can go much higher resistance, so lifting more weight. But it also isolates the vibrations and protects the scientific experiments that we're doing as well. So that was even better.
All right, I think we have another question here.
Michael Galindo for Americaspace.com for Peggy. When did you find out that your mission was going to be extended? Did you have any previous idea that it was?
They talked to me about it the day before my launch, that it might be a possibility. And it wasn't confirmed until probably within a month of when I was supposed to be landing, and maybe even a little less than that, maybe a couple of weeks. So it was out there as a maybe. So psychologically, I told my husband we were going to have a flexible plan for happiness. We're going to be happy if I come home in June, and we're going to be happy if I come home in September. So it worked out. We were happy.
Definitely seemed. All right, another one from the phone bridge now from Creston News Advertiser.
You said in the interview that you think training and space travel gets easier as you get older. Do you still stand by that?
Well, definitely sleeping in space is way easier. Yeah, I think the aches and pains that you feel down here, you don't feel them up there. And in general, much fewer aches and pains up in space in zero gravity, just because it takes so little to move around. So, yeah, I still stand by that.
Anything you feel like you didn't know going in that you've learned and you'll take into your next mission?
Oh boy, there's so much.
More sauce.
More sauce. More sriracha. More coffee. No, there's so much, and that's why I think that the space station is getting so much better every single expedition, because we are learning and we're growing and we're evolving. And there's, you know, it was interesting. Every time I'd grab we call them CTB. I don't even know what CTB stands for. Bag.
Crew transfer bag?
Maybe so. Ooh, cargo transfer bag. So you'd pick it, and there's Velcro in different places and straps in different places. You're like, what the heck? This is crazy. Why are they there? And then you'd stick it someplace. You'd be like, that's why. And so many parts of the station are better and more refined than they were, that you can't help but grow and get better. And there's too many to list.
We have a question from Twitter for you from Stacy Smith, who wants to know what's been the most difficult or comical adjustment for Back to Gravity.
Stacy. I know Stacy. It's comical. You know, it's interesting. Your brain adapts so quickly. So when I got up to orbit, the brain has to go, vestibular, you are lying to me. I'm not spinning. I'm not doing this. I'm turning you off. And so after about a week or so, it just shuts it down. And you use your vision and kind of map out the environment, and you maneuver that way. Coming home, you know, I was lucky enough, I kind of adapted quickly as long as my eyes were open. And I was doing good, and I was walking. And you close your eyes, and wow. We have this platform test that we stand there, and there's a reason you wear a harness, because you close your eyes, and I could feel my legs, you know, just kind of going. The brain trying to control it. It's like, dude, you've told me to ignore vestibular for all these months, and now you want me to use it? No way. And so you just fall over, you know, into the wall or whatever. It's getting to use your vestibular again, and that balance when your eyes are closed was. You can ask the people that were around me. That was definitely comical.
All right, I think we've got a couple of follow-up questions here in the room from Robert first.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com again. We're just under a month from the 60th anniversary of Sputnik, and so we went from having one satellite in orbit to both of you actually becoming more or less tethered satellites during spacewalks. I wonder if there was any point during your mission that that legacy of advancement in space sort of struck you, or just in reflecting back on your mission, what it means this past 60 years, how far we've come and where we're going.
I think for me, kind of the one moment was realizing we did the 200th spacewalk. I remember when I first joined the astronaut office, everyone talked about the wall of EVAs. It was going to be impossible to build the space station because of the wall of EVAs. There were just too many. It just wasn't going to physically be able to be done. And we did it.
It's pretty awesome. I think for me it was, you know, we launched, our launch was the first April launch since Yuri Gagarin. And we even have, wherever our patch is, we have a little Sputnik on the patch because of the 60 years. But I think he and what he represented was this amazing legacy that we were proud to be a part of. There's a little picture of him with the dove, with a big old smile. And I think that opening of space for everyone and being a part of an international space station where we depended on each other every day for all the systems, for help, for everything. And what we're able to accomplish every day on that space station is just amazing. So I think for both of us, to be a part of that legacy and to show the world as, you know, probably the best example of international cooperation in history, we are very proud to be a part of that.
Okay, let's go back to Sophie now.
Hi, Sophie with Cosmic Chicago again. A question for both Jack and Peggy. I'm going to paraphrase a question that one of my former Girl Scouts posed. Most of us aspire to be astronauts and go to space. Now that you've lived the dream and been to space, what's your next dream?
Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
You know, I think being a part of exploration, any part of exploration, is really interesting, satisfying, gratifying. Those are the things that keep me going. And so, something in space exploration. I don't know what exactly yet. Haven't had time to think about it.
Boy, I don't know either what I'm going to do when I grow up. There's a little plaque that my mom had in my bathroom growing up, and it said, "What you are is God's gift to you, and what you become is your gift to Him." And I think that spaceflight is a gift. We were given by the U.S. taxpayer to get up there and get infected with this just passion for space. I think it's our job to do everything in our power to spread that and to infect as many people as we can, help build the infrastructure to make sure that we have a permanent foothold in space. And I don't know how to do that best yet, but that's what my eyes are open to find.
It's a good infection.
Good infection. It's a good infection. You want this one.
Well, getting back to some of the science questions that we talked about earlier, we have Code Designs on Twitter. Katie on Twitter wants to know what's the advantage of doing an experiment on space versus on the Earth?
Well, the International Space Station is a unique laboratory in a lot of ways. It's the only one that can give you long duration, zero gravity. And having microgravity as a variable allows investigators to look at things in a different way that they can't down here on Earth. There's a lot of physical properties, like the combustion experiments that we were doing. The flames just don't burn the same way. And they had what's called cool flames. So something would burn, they'd inject these fuels and ignite them, and they would appear to burn out. And then using special cameras, they could see that these flames were actually still burning, but at a cool level that they can't see on Earth because you have too many convective forces working, gravitational forces that don't allow it to happen. And it helps us understand how things work on the ground, how burning and different combustion things work on the ground as well. But it's also important for our exploration missions because if we better understand how to take advantage of this microgravity environment and maybe burn more efficiently, it could be a huge advantage in our future exploration as well. So there's just all kinds of ways that the lack of gravity can provide a different twist on their understanding of basic principles that we have here on the ground.
It's kind of like you were referring to earlier, we don't even always know what we're going to learn, so how it can be used in the future. I have one here from Code Designs on Twitter for you. They want to know, was Garth Brooks the highlight of the space mission?
Well, it was sure cool. My favorite artist and my favorite song, so having Garth sing The River was amazing. I think it was my 20th anniversary on orbit, so I got to marry my wife again, and that was kind of the highlight. And then the spacewalks were great, but Garth doesn't beat my wife, but he's pretty awesome.
Good answer. All right, and I think that we also have another follow-up on the phone bridge from Historical Aerospace News Media.
Yes, this question is for Peggy. Peggy, can you tell me, you look fantastic returning from the extended stay on a long mission that you were on. You look very well, very good physically. You look strong and sound. Can you tell me, did you notice physically any pain in your joints, your knees, your shoulders, etc.? Did you feel more strain on your eyes, etc., on the extended length of this mission?
Oh, well, if you're asking compared to pre-flight, no, I had a lot of pain in my joints pre-flight, so I don't know that I noticed any more pain. I think my back felt stiffer this time than before. The neurovestibular part seemed to come back a little quicker than it did on previous flights, so I think that's a learned thing. I think that even though it had been 8 years, I think there is some learning that your brain remembers how to switch back to Earth mode versus microgravity mode. And what was the rest of the question? I forgot already. Maybe memory might be a problem.
Anything that was, more strained on this extended length of your mission?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't really think it made any difference. My eyes actually right now are better than they were when I launched, which is a little unusual. It didn't happen on previous flights. I think that has to do with old age and how your eyes have changed and then how being in zero gravity kind of reshapes them. So it probably not going to last more than 30 days they're giving me. So, but I'm like, I'll take advantage of it while I can.
All right. We have another question from Facebook. This is from a teacher, social sciences teacher for K through 12, who wants to know if you have any advice for her girl students to become curious like you.
Well, I think that historically, if you look at studies, they say that girls, 50-50 are interested in the sciences. And then somewhere along the way, our girls are either being persuaded or dissuaded somehow into thinking that's not a good career choice for them, or that's not a life choice for them. And so we need to figure out a way to overcome that and keep everybody interested.
Do you remember a point from your childhood that you really kind of felt the spark ignite, or was it always there?
I always had an interest in science from when I was very young, and so luckily nobody ever told me I couldn't. And I had great role models like Dr. Kraft.
All right, one more question from Facebook from Linda O'Connor. She wants to know, what do you miss most about living on the space station?
Floating.
Ooh, floating.
Floating.
It's awesome. Like, I'm kind of a big guy, but on the space station, you kind of feel like a ballerina. You don't weigh anything, so you feel like you're flexible and you could do spins and everything, and then you come back and you're like, yeah, I'm not a ballerina. But it's awesome. It's a lot of fun.
Floating is, you don't get tired of it.
Nope.
Get tired of sometimes losing the tools, but you don't get tired of the floating.
Yeah, if the tools could just not float, but you could still float, that would be perfect.
We should get them working on that.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have a question kind of back in the back here.
Hi, Roger Weiss with MAPI. I was just wondering, there's such a diverse spectrum or breadth of facilities and capabilities for research up on station. And I was just wondering, for each of you, were you partial to any particular facility or capability? I know you mentioned some conversation just randomly, but was there anyone that you were partial to for its multidisciplinary capabilities and for the reason it gave you pause, or that there was a great unexpected results that you got at any given time and that you couldn't wait to return to doing or utilizing that particular capability?
From a facility perspective, I think the Microgravity Sciences glove box has the most diverse experiment types in it. We did everything from studies looking at how fluid and liquid air mixtures through wetted and non-wetted substances. I've done superconductor crystals in there, and they heat them up to over 800 degrees. Did the tissue culture in there. We do rodent research in there. There's so many different types of investigations that can happen inside the MSG. I like it because of that flexibility. But I still think there's some really unique capabilities in many of the other facilities that we enjoyed working in all of them. We did specialize a little bit, but it just helped for efficiency to specialize a little bit. But it was fun working on all of them.
It was. Yeah, we specialized because there's only two of us for so long. And to be able to get all the science, especially SpaceX 11, we kind of encompassed that alone. And we specialized in different parts of the large science so that we could get more and more efficient. I did a lot in the Japanese module, and there's a lot of great capabilities in there. One of them is called ELF. It levitates little pieces, little balls of metal, and then melts them with a laser. That's just awesome. There's just, and every single rack in the space station you can reconfigure. As a kid growing up on a construction site, I love tinkering and doing that and working with the racks to repurpose them. So I think in general, we've just gotten, obviously the MSG is a specialized piece of equipment that's amazing, but I think the entire space station is full of that stuff that you can repurpose and really adapt to whatever the science is. So it's an exciting place.
And I think the quantity of science that we were doing now between SpaceX's or different cargo vehicles coming and arriving, we would reconfigure express racks. We'd just take and move,
Absolutely.
these 5, 6 different lockers, put them somewhere else, bring out new sets of hardware for the new investigations that were coming up on the next one. That was actually really cool that we could specialize the racks for the science that we were doing. I thought that was neat.
Kamra and Paulo were like, dude, why are all these holes in the racks? It's like, wait till SpaceX 12 gets here. And within a week, everything's full. And they're just cranking the science away. It was neat.
That's great. I think we have a follow-up here from Mark.
Thank you, Mark Carreau from Aviation Week. I'd like to ask both of you, do both expect to launch again? And I'm honestly, especially asking Peggy, but I think it's a good question always to ask everyone who's just come back what they're thinking about as far as flying again.
I'd love to fly again. I don't know that that's probably practical at this point, but I don't know. If we keep doing commercial things, maybe there'll be an option out there somewhere. Maybe somebody will want to hire a scientist to go do their experiments for them in space.
Ed, for me, we talked about it. It's a gift, and I don't ever expect that gift again. You can't expect it. I'd love to fly, but I'm going to do as much as I can with what I've been given so far. And I think it's important for us to spread the wealth and get as many people to experience that amazing place as possible.
Well, I think we'd all love to see both of you back in space, so we'll hope for the best. But I think that's about all we have time for today here in our news conference. If you want to keep up with what's going on the International Space Station, you can do so online at www.nasa.gov/station. And of course, both of these folks are on social media. You can follow along with what they're doing on Twitter at AstroPeggy and Astro2Fish, also Facebook, NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, and Instagram for Jack as well. So lots of different opportunities there. Hope to see you again soon, and this is NASA TV.